good afternoon, or good morning or good evening, depending on where our virtual audience is joining us from. Thank you for taking the time today to attend our second annual Creating Connections event, what graduate students of color need to know about mentorship. My name is April Thompson, and I'm the Director of Graduate Recruitment and Engagement at NYU. I'm proud to say that I lead the team that created this event, so hand clap for my team for putting on this amazing event. This event is very personal to me. As a Black first-generation graduate student, my network of peers and mentors was critical to my success in graduate school and beyond, even in my career today. So I'm very excited to engage in this important discussion with you. We'd like to begin our program with the acknowledgement that New York University is located in ancestral Lenape homelands, and we recognize the longstanding significance of these lands for Lenape nations, past and present. We are also conscious that New York City has the largest urban native population in the United States. We believe that historical awareness of Indigenous exclusion and erasure is critically important, and we are committed to working to overcome their effects in our own educational institutions. Before we begin, I'm going to briefly run through a few event logistics. First, as some of you may have noticed, this event is being recorded. All attendees, both in person and those joining us on Zoom, will receive a link to the recording following the event. So if you miss anything, it's totally okay. You're going to get the recording, and feel free to share with your friends, your colleagues, and your network. Second, for our virtual audience, closed captioning is available by clicking the live transcript button at the bottom of your screen. And third, we encourage you to join the conversation on Twitter using the hashtag NYU Creating Connections. Finally, a roadmap for today's session. I'm going to turn it over to Carol Kim, who will welcome you and speak a little bit about the importance of mentorship in academia. Then Dr. Charlton McIlwain will give our plenary address. We'll welcome an all-star faculty panel who will discuss their experiences with mentoring and mentorship. And our virtual program will conclude, and we'll host an in-person networking session where you can continue to foster those connections that you've made with current and new NYU graduate students. Sound like a plan? Yeah? All right. And with that, I'd like to introduce Carol Kim. Carol Kim is the Vice President of Global Recruitment, Admissions, and Financial Aid at New York University. Before joining NYU, she served as the inaugural Senior Vice President, Provost of Global Partnerships and Enrollment at the New School, charged with negotiating a potential Parsons School of Design in Shenzhen, China. Carol has held senior executive leadership positions in 10 Legs, a technology company where she served as the Vice President for Global Partnerships, empowering higher education institutions to build online communities. At UCheng Education in Beijing, China, where as the inaugural Vice President of Planning and Communications, she led the team that built the very first LEED Gold certified educational building in Beijing. And at the California Institute of the Arts, first as the inaugural Dean of Enrollment Management, and then as the inaugural Vice President of International Relations. Wow, Carol. While earning her BS and MA from NYU, Carol danced professionally and trained at the US Olympic Training Center multiple times as a rhythmic gymnast. She also holds a certificate in management and leadership in education from the Harvard Graduate School of Education, and recently defended her doctoral thesis at the University of Pennsylvania. Please join me in welcoming Vice President Carol Kim.
I think for future notice, no one should read anyone's bio like that. Thank you, April. And hello, everyone. It is my honor to congratulate you and to welcome you again here on behalf of the university. This is quite a special event. This is our first in-person streaming as well event in quite some time. And really, it's such a pleasure to have all of you join us today. I'd also like to congratulate you on your admission to New York University's graduate and professional programs. Getting into NYU at any level is an accomplishment. And as you heard from April, I have my undergraduate as well as my master's here. And I'm pretty sure I would not be admitted if this was happening today. So really, congratulations to so many of you. Whether you're here because of your academic success, you want to learn more about research experience, or that you would like to understand more of portfolio, audition, professional accomplishments, I hope you feel proud to be here and on the cusp of your next chapter in your academic or your career. I'd also like to thank you for participating here in this special program. You know, when we conceived of this program, mostly for graduate students of color and allies, we did not want to just give you a tour of our amazing facilities. I know that some of you did join our tour today, but we didn't also want to just give you a lecture about the world-class institution that we are. We really wanted to create a conversation. And that's what we are actually presenting to you today, is a conversation that we hope will be very valuable to you no matter where you are and where you will enroll. We hope that you will join us here at NYU, but we really hope that you will take this conversation to nurture you for the future. The need for graduate students to find structure and to find a support structure among faculty, as well as those who are senior to you, as well as your other peers, is really important. And it's no secret, graduate school is tough. And getting through graduate school, you will have to get over significant barriers. But one way to address some of these challenges is for you to find space to share with others and experts, and you have a chance to meet one another. And so we really believe that an event such as this one, where it convenes so many of you here today, that you will start to build your community of support and empower you, and for us to help you navigate some of the challenges of what it's like to go to graduate and professional school, and really beyond that as well. For me personally, the importance of mentorship and network building in graduate school isn't just limited to this event. One of the reasons that I am so happy to be here with you is in my own academic experience and research. As April mentioned, I literally just defended my doctoral dissertation 2 weeks ago, and I'm still recovering. For me personally, I use my positionality as an Asian American female senior leader on a higher education campus to leverage and to see really the dearth of other Asian American senior leaders, especially women. There's a lot of research out there that shows that mentorship is a key component for you to rise in leadership in no matter which industry. And unfortunately, within the Asian American circles, the mentorship is not a very big part of what has been. And I really hope that, for me personally, that changes into the future, and that it starts at a place like this one. There are many institutions, especially selective ones, where the growth of the students and students of color, they're growing. Yet there are very few senior faculty and leadership that model those that you can connect to. And we really hope that this is something that will inspire you, and that you will rise, and that you will also tap into others and find mentorship from those that are around you, because it really will be a key component to not only your work, but through your peers, as well as the inspiration that I hope that you will find in your growth, because there will be a lot of room for all of you to rise to leadership if that's what you would like. So we're here to support you and to grow with you in your networking opportunities. And so with that, I'd like to introduce you to the next speaker. It is Dr. Charlton McIlwain. Did I do that right? Charlton McIlwain is our Vice Provost for Faculty Development and Engagement. He is a professor of media, culture, and communication here at NYU's Steinhardt. And he's also the author of a recent book called Black Software, the Internet and Racial Justice, From the Afronet to Black Lives Matter. He works at the intersections of computing technology, race, inequality, and racial justice activism. He has served as an expert witness in landmark US federal court cases on reverse redlining, racial targeting in mortgage lending, and he recently testified before the US House Committee on Financial Services about the impacts of automation and artificial intelligence on the financial services sector. He writes regularly for outlets such as The Guardian, Slate's Future Tense, MIT Technology Review, and more. Dr. McIlwain is the founder of the Center for Critical Race and Digital Studies. He heads NYU's Alliance for Public Interest Technology and is NYU's designee to the Public Interest Technology University Network. And he is also the president of the board at the Data and Society Research Institute. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Charlton McIlwain to deliver his address titled, Finding Your People, a Guide for Graduate School and Whatever Comes Next.
Thank you for that. I also will double down on you. No one should ever read those full bios, but thank you. Anyway, it is very great to be here with all of you, to see all of you. My name is Charlton McIlwain. This year marks my 22nd year at NYU. Coming here first as a professor, continuing as that, but also occupying a number of roles and currently Vice Provost for faculty here at NYU. So I want to start with a couple of caveats. First of all, I'm a very casual person, so you'll start to see that. It's Friday. Should loosen up a little bit, smile, say something. If you have questions, want to respond to something, I'm always one that if something moves you while I'm speaking, feel free to say it. I can roll with that. But I'm going to start off with a couple of caveats because when I was asked to speak for a few minutes here today, my thoughts naturally went back to where I started and when I started the journey that many of you are just beginning. And so the two caveats are, number one, I am the warm-up. You have an expert panel coming after this, so I'm really just kind of warming things up for them. Also, I'm a technology historian, so mostly what I like to do is to tell stories, and so that's what I'm going to do today, and do so in a way to try to think about a couple of things that I think will be helpful for you as you embark on this journey, as you continue that journey both in and through graduate and professional school and whatever comes next. As Carol said, graduate school is hard. It is why, when I was about 21 years old, finishing up my bachelor's degree in family psychology, my last year, about this time of that year, I looked at my major professor, who was this kind of a quintessential, stereotypical German professor, very austere, very straight-laced, no sense of humor whatsoever. And I raised my hand in the middle of class and I said, Dr. Jeske, I've been wondering, what would someone do if they wanted to pursue this career path but didn't want to go to graduate school? That's what he did. Silence. And he looked at me and in front of all of my peers said, nothing. And I was heartbroken because I did not want to go to graduate school. I didn't see that as part of my future. And so where I am, I like to say to a lot of people, is largely by accident and not by foresight. But that was my kind of entry point into thinking about grad school, and spent a couple of years after that working, realizing ultimately after a couple of years that that advice was correct, and started on my own graduate school career. And it was hard, but I also think it absolutely was one of the best moments, several years of my life. And I think it is largely can be that way for all of you. So here's a couple of things that I wanted to just provide in the way of advice, observation, as you're starting to embark on this moment. Two things that I think really connect to the title and reason for this event today, and it's about connection. And so two real pieces of advice. The first, very simply, bring your entourage with you. Hopefully all of you will be coming right here to Washington Square. Some of you, that may not be in the cards. I know some of you are still making that decisions. But wherever you decide to come, whenever you begin this particular leg of your journey, bring your entourage with you. And to be clear, this is NYU. There are moments where you find students who have literal entourages. I have never been one of those people. And so I'm talking about that figurative entourage. I'm talking about those people who from the very beginnings and over the course of your life up to this point have always had your best interest in mind. The people who have supported you, the people who have nurtured you, given you advice, sustained you, and seen you through those challenges over and over and over again. The people who have that wisdom that you draw on when you need that energy, when you're thinking about, what do I do next? What comes next? What path should I take? What decision should I make? Bring that entourage with you. There are many in mind. There were many even at that time when I started on my graduate school journey that were part of that entourage. I'll tell you about just a couple of them. One was Verona Vaughn, more affectionately known as Grandma Mac for us. She was my grandmother, had spent all of her life as a social services professional, worked in a housing project, helping people find work, get work, find jobs. She was one of those people in the community that always had people over. I always show up and there's someone new coming to dinner, another new friend that's coming over for a coffee or tea that my grandmother was helping along the way, often immigrants from other countries, new people coming to that large city that she lived in. And so she spent her life devoted to helping other people. And so she was a magnificent person. And years later, when I graduated from my bachelor's degree, she and many others in my family came out for the graduation, probably 10 or 12 of them. And I remember a moment, I went to a small liberal arts college in the middle of nowhere in Oklahoma. Any Oklahoma people no? Anybody know where Oklahoma is? Okay, a few of you, all right. And so it was a small place, not a terribly diverse place, but there was one of the professors who was one of my favorite, a white woman who was a professor of communication, taught things like conflict resolution and mediation and so forth. And so there was an event prior to graduation where all the families could come and a kind of a reception and so forth. And so I was looking forward to introducing my grandmother and other members of my family to this professor that I'd really come to like and respect a lot. And so I introduced the two of them. And the professor looked at my grandmother at some point and said, you know, Charlton can really be anything that he wants to be. And I was a little shocked by my grandmother's response, which was she kind of looked at the woman a little cross-eyed and said, he knows that. As if to say, I needed you to validate what I've been telling him all of his life, what he knows. But that's the kind of person I'm talking about in your entourage, the person who, no matter what happens, knows and expects you to succeed. The person who's always in your ear, whether they're there with you physically or not, saying, this is the path to where you want to go. Take that one, not this one. It's the person you know when the time comes, there's a hard decision, there's a tough moment, you know whose phone number to call and to dial. My grandmother was one of those people who said, we will beg, borrow, and steal to make sure you get through your education. That's the kind of commitment of the kinds of people in your entourage that you should bring with you. She was also the person that several years into my PhD looked at me one time and said, so are you going to get a job? I assured her it was coming one day. The other person in my entourage, a gentleman named George Henderson. Dr. George Henderson happened to be the first African-American professor ever hired at the University of Oklahoma. He was the person that I first saw when I applied to graduate school and didn't get into the program because they said my 2.8 GPA was a little bit too low. So I ended up in Dr. George Henderson's office and I said, look, I will bet on myself. I went to a really great school, my 2.8, I will guarantee you will outmatch all the other kids you led into this program that came from other schools and got 4.0 or whatever GPA. And he looked at me and he said, I'll bet on you too for one semester. If you make it, great. If you don't, I've given you your shot. And that was all I needed at that time. Things went extremely well. And Dr. Henderson became one of those people in my entourage, one of those people who time and again showed up when I needed someone. When I was in that doctoral class and decided I would not take the easy road and do an essay that refuted everything that my professor said and believed in this political ethics course. And doing so didn't get me a great grade. In fact, it got me an F, which all of you will know in graduate school is a death knell. You get one of those, you're out. And so Dr. Henderson was one of those people who listened as I explained what happened and made a phone call and just said, really? Do something different. And so things changed. And there were moments like that over and over the course of my career in and through graduate school. But it is these kinds of people that I say bring with you. There will be moments through your career in graduate school and professional school where things get hard. It might be hard in terms of the academics. It might be hard in terms of the finances and getting by. It might be hard because of what you know is going on elsewhere with your family who is struggling and you're not there to lend a hand. In those moments, bring that entourage with you. Have them there at the ready. And I can promise you that will help get you through. The second thing, Not only bring your entourage with you, but find your people. What does that mean? The people that are actually around you in your network as you go through your day-to-day of graduate professional school life. Similar types of people of those in your entourage, but people that are around you who bond with you, who know you, who connect with you, who you quickly learn and know has your back, has your best interest in mind, is invested in your success. Sometimes we think when I say something like find your people, we automatically go to, well, the people who look like me, the people who came where I came from, but your people are your people, and you'll figure out who those are almost intuitively, and sometimes they're not who you might think they would be. But those are the ones you have to find. My people during grad school were a small group of folks that we quickly bonded with each other in our first year. This is both my master's degree and then going into my doctoral degree. They were the people who I spent countless hours with, huddled at the library. In Norman, Oklahoma, there was a library. This library was a bar close to the department where we all hung out. And so we spent much time there at the bar called the library. Sometimes we were working, most of the times we weren't, but we were doing what we needed to do. We were making those connections, the connections that we needed to sustain us there. So as you embark on this journey, you're going to be tempted, and some people will even give you the advice to keep your head down, do your work, keep your nose in the books, keep your eyes on the screen, fill your time doing the most in your academics. Resist that. You've got to do it, to be sure, and you've got to do it enough to get you what you need out of your program. But don't do so at the exclusion of looking up, seeing who's around you, and making the kinds of connections that you need not only to sustain you through your academic career, but beyond. The folks that I've found that were my people became my people then and have continued to be. They're the people I go and hang out with for summer vacations. They're the people on whose wills are my name and that of my spouse to care for their kids if the worst should happen. These are the kinds of connections that will sustain us not only through our journey now, but through our lifelong journey. And we need those people. And so if I can give you any parting advice, bring the entourage with you. Take time through your everyday struggles of being in and out of the classroom to make the connections to find your people and connect with those people. I will end by saying this. There's a program about 7 or 8 years ago that I started. It was called Faculty First Look. It was a program designed to bring in doctoral students who were nearing the end of their program, about a year or two out from dissertation, and begin exposing them to the academic job market. And so this was a way to introduce them to pathways, make that pathway broader and easier for folks that were looking to achieve an academic career as a professor or a researcher at a higher education institution. And the first cohort that we had, which was about 30 scholars, I remember the day hadn't even gone too long. This was a 3-day program. First day, by about 1 o'clock in the afternoon in the session, I did just a quick check-in with the group. All of them, and these were all predominantly emerging scholars of color, and I said, how are things going? What are you getting out of the program thus far? Is it meeting your expectations? And I remember someone raising their hand and saying, all of the things that you all have said has been amazing, but that's not it. And this person broke down looking around and said, this is the first time I've been in a room this big and looked around and thought, all of my people are here. And that's what sustained them through that program. That's what has sustained them. Many of these folks now 7 or 8 years into their careers, still part of that same network and those connections that they have nurtured. So welcome, congratulations on your entry into NYU. I hope as many of you as possible will decide to take the next leg of your journey here with us at NYU. But even if you don't, when you embark on that career, please remember those two things. Bring your entourage with you, find your people. I'm a very bad person at keeping time. I wanted to have a few minutes for questions. I'll let someone tell us if we have that. Yep. All right. Thank you. You've been amazing. And I'm happy to answer a couple of questions if any of you have one. Thank you. Anyone?
Well, everyone here thinks there's a question from the Zoom, so I'm going to ask you that question.
Thank you,
and I think this
Zoom.
is a good precursor to the panel discussion as well. So,
Indeed.
my biggest challenge in undergraduate was not being able to find peer mentorship or mentorship outside my cohort. Any advice for non-traditional students who are not adolescents, more mature students, working students, first-gen students, students who are parents, etc.?
Yeah, that is a great question. And I think at least one answer to that question is to ask, to look for, and to not stop asking and looking for those things. And I will say certainly about this institution that there are many people, whether you're undergraduate students, graduate and professional students, commuter students, non-traditional students, all of those, where there are multiple people and groups around the institution that are vested in your success and have information that can help make the connections that you are looking to make and find your people, right? We are used to having to do that if for no other reason than by virtue of being in such a large city where it's easy to get lost. But what that also means is being in such a large and diverse place is your people are here. You might not immediately find them, but look for them, ask for help in finding them, find those offices that are designed to help you make those connections, and be relentless in your pursuit of where those directions, advice, guidance, instruction lie until you find the kinds of support that you're hoping to find. Thank you, whoever in the Zoom universe asked that question. Anything more? All right.
Thank you. Hi, it was so great listening to your speech.
Thank you.
I guess this is, I'm seeking advice around this too. In the past, when I've had mentorships, it was mostly a part of a structured program, like meet 3 times in 3 months, and then it was really difficult keeping up with the people. And as I'm growing older, sometimes I feel awkward reaching out to these people because it feels a little bit transactional. Like I want to tell them what I'm up to, but then I don't know if they're still interested in continuing that relationship. And I've just been like really struggling with not feeling like I can reach out or not feeling like I'm bothering the people, you know, when it's a relationship spanning multiple years and beyond.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, you know, one that I've long struggled with. I'm not terribly extroverted. I also have experienced those moments where you just think, you know, I don't want to put people out, and it seems like maybe I'm, you know, at the margins of doing that. And so what I would say is to continue to reach out, right? It may not feel comfortable, but what I have observed over years is that if people have ever played a role formally or informally as a mentor, a coach, advisor, chances are that is part of who they are. And so the connection or the continual outreach is not going to put that person back, right? I could spend every minute of this day occupied with work and things to do, right? And every day almost, there is a faculty member, a graduate student, sometimes current, sometimes from 10, 15 years ago, that reaches out and says, hey, I need some help. I need some advice. Can you write this for me? Can you help me make this kind of connection? And it never feels like a burden. I may have to say, it might take me a couple of weeks to do that, but it is never a burden. And my sense is many of the people that you might start a connection with like that, they're going to be that way as well. And so even if there are gaps in time and distance and so forth, that same impulse that said, hey, I'm here for you now to help is the same years later when you're in different places, different paths and so forth. And so I would just simply say to keep at it. Indeed. All right. That's it. All right. Sorry. All right. Thank you all. Take care.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. That was great. Thank you. Bring your entourage and find your people. I love that. So many times when I was starting graduate school, I kept getting the advice, you need to find mentors, you need to find mentors. But other than those structured programs that you were talking about, I didn't know where to look. I didn't know how to foster those connections. So hopefully we'll have a chance to talk a little bit more about that with our all-star faculty panel. So thank you. Thanks again, Charlton. That was amazing. So now we'll move into our panel and we'll have a Q&A after the panel for additional questions as well. I will not read the full bios this time, but I will introduce our panelists and I'm going to welcome them to come on up on stage as I remind you of their names and titles. You can also find the full link, or the link to their full bios in the chat if you're on Zoom, and we will provide a QR code that you can scan to learn more about these amazing panelists. So I'd like to welcome Dr. Leo Douglas, who is the Clinical Assistant Professor in Liberal Studies. Dr. Michelle Crespo-Fierro, who's a clinical associate professor at the Roy Myers College of Nursing, a fellow at the New York Academy of Medicine, and the director of the LEAD Honors Program. Dr. Niyati Parekh, who's the associate vice provost for faculty initiatives, the Office of the Provost and the professor of public health and a professor of public health nutrition in the School of Global Public Health. And Shawn Smith-Cruz, who's the Associate Dean for Teaching, Learning, and Engagement in the NYU Division of Libraries. Welcome to our panel. Thank you so much. I'm gonna switch over here. Hello, can you all hear me? I also have the great honor of moderating this amazing panel. So I've put together some questions that I think will be helpful, but again, we'll have a full Q&A, so if there's something that I miss and that you all as an audience want to ask, feel free to write those down or put them in the Q&A on Zoom and we'll get to those. So first, I just want to thank all of our amazing panelists. I am a big fan of everybody on this stage. I was hoping that each of you could just talk a little bit about the importance of mentorship in your own personal leadership and academic journey, both as a student and now in your career. How have mentors impacted you? Yeah, and whoever wants to jump in first. Do you want to? Oh, yeah.
My 5-year-old school bus was just calling well. Yes, a part of being a mentor as well is also, I must say, having a real life, including family and kids and everything. Well, first of all, just let me say how honored I am to be here, and thank you. This is such an important space, and one I really wish that I had more of when I was at your level. You know, thinking about why having a mentor, the importance of mentors, and thinking about this early is something which is so very important, because it can really shape everything that happens next. Having terrible mentors or no mentors can really derail your career. And having great mentors can really set you up in ways that you did not even mean to progress, or things that you would have achieved. So, you know, I could not emphasize this more. You know, very earlier on in my career, I'm Jamaican. I was in the University of the West Indies. I met mentors who opened the doors for me to do very important programs in North America, in Canada, at Tulane University, various institutions which were very close, very expensive, and that I would not even have had the opportunity to get a visa to attend. But because there was somebody who was in a position of power and influence, who was invested in a specific issue, and more importantly, invested in me, these became very groundbreaking opportunities, which then became the basis of my career.
It's a DIY. Got to turn it on yourself. So for me, my undergrad was here at NYU when the College of Nursing was part of what is now called Steinhardt. And I would say that at that point in time, everything was focused on getting through and getting a job. At that point in time, there was a shortage. There is a shortage now of nurses. So that was the main focus. But I would say that while I was in my undergrad, the clinical professors that we had who took us out to the hospitals and helping us to meet all our clinical requirements, they actually opened the door for me to think about a graduate degree. When I came into this, I was thinking, okay, I know I need a bachelor's, I'm going to do the bachelor's, and then I'm going to work. But it became very clear to me that I needed to move on. And I would say that my true mentorship came on my job. It was actually my boss who was telling me, okay, and again, he didn't know that I already had a plan to go back for graduate school, but he was like, okay, this is a program that would be good for you if you want to continue doing this work in this specialty area. He also helped me connect to other nurses in my professional specialty, which is HIV and AIDS. So that became a huge part of the entourage. There was, you know, the entourage that we're born into, and then there's the entourage that we make. That was my entourage that I made. And that, again, pushed me forward. When I was thinking about my doctorate, and I will say there is a good 13-year gap between when I finished my master's degree and I started my doctorate. Besides the opportunities, because I was already working here at NYU, those opportunities, you kind of read the, you know, the writing is on the wall. You're like, all right, I got to go back for my doctorate. But again, it was that entourage in my specialty area. There were people all around there, all throughout. They were like, Michelle, you got to go. Michelle, you've got to go. So it became this refrain. And then, you know, being the very stubborn New Yorker, Puerto Rican, you know, I finally listened. It took a long time, but everything needed to align. And it was always them that kept me going. And anytime that I didn't have the right match, the mentoring that I needed in academia, it was always this group that I could always go back to. And they were all people in academia, just in other, other universities. So that was where mentoring was really very important. And I'll stop there.
Thanks, Michelle.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Niyati Parekh, and welcome to NYU. My journey was, I was an international student, and I guess the question is mentors in my life and mentoring today. So I just want to say that when I reflect on mentoring, I think mentoring is romanticized a bit now. You don't need formal programs, and you need formal programs, but your mentors don't necessarily have to be formal mentors. I think you sort of go with life and find mentors along the way, and not one mentor will satisfy all aspects. Okay, so I think when I think back at my journey, that's what it was. So I was a woman in India, and I can't believe I'm saying this in 2023, but even till today, I have to pick and choose what I report back to my family in terms of what I do professionally, even till today. So I've been in this country, I came here 21 years ago, right? I guess days before 9/11 happened. I came in August for the semester to start in September. But how I got here was the most powerful story of mentorship, which was not really mentorship. It was just a classmate of mine who plucked me out of this society that I was trapped in, because I was in my 20s and there was no other option but to get married. Okay, and he was a classmate I met after years and just said, "You don't look like yourself at all. What's going on?" And I said, "I feel like I'm running out of options. Either it's, the arranged marriage system." I think there's a Netflix TV show, that was me. 40 times, and I kept saying no, and people wouldn't have dinner with me at night if I didn't go out and see some random guy. So this person plucked me out of this trap, and I came to Madison, Wisconsin. So you can imagine, from Mumbai to Madison, in a place that they didn't exactly know what to do with too many international people, right? The food smells different, the language, all of this. No, language was never a real barrier, but I sound different. So I'm just thinking that the person who opened the doors for me to even dream, in a sense, was a mentor. Just to dream, just said, forget everything else. I'll help you format a CV the way Americans expect to look at it, and you write your personal statement. And I remember going through the pages of a GRE book and actually penciling stuff. The email wasn't even a thing. Really, I had to go to a center that had computers and do stuff there. But this person opened doors for me. And when I finally came here with $200 and 2 suitcases to this country, I said, "How can I thank you? How can I?" And he said, "Oh, you don't have to thank me, you just have to pay it forward." And so that brings me to my present. What I'm doing right now at the Office of the Provost is mentoring programs. And I have taken it seriously every single day. I really pass it on and pay it forward. So I'm just saying there's been multiple mentors since then. And like I said, each mentor does something different. I'll kind of stop at that and talk about some of the aspects of mentoring with your next questions. So it's over to you, Shawn.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for that, because I'm part of one of Niyati's programs of mentorship, and I love that. This talk started with a land acknowledgement, and that each of us are speaking about what grounds us and what brings us here into this space, and through time and geography and different planes, because that's part of what I think this conversation is placing us, is in space with each other. And for me, I don't think of time and space in a linear way. And so I'm always continuously focused on the present and the past and the people that walk within those spaces. And when Charlton talks about his grandmother, I'm thinking that mentorship is ancestral, right? Like, we are bringing it with us and it's inside of us and through us. So when you're thinking, who's telling me whether to go left or right or what decisions to make, it's the people, but it's also that ancestral knowledge that we walk with inside of ourselves. And that's what I would say grounds me. Mostly because I am from New York City. And so being in New York, There's so much landscape and there's so many people in this room. This is what New York City looks like. It's really amazing. And as a New Yorker, there's been a lot of organizing in my life. It's a city of unrest, a city of conflict and great hope and imagination. And so we're often protesting in the streets. We're bringing our mayor and the city council to charge. We're thinking about our constituencies and who we are and how we can make impact on the country and then the globe, hopefully not in a colonizing way, right? And so we're often tempering that line. And for me, the mentorship has always begun on the ground. It's begun in the community and who we're listening to when we're organizing and which collaborations we're making. And for me, I didn't go to NYU. I went to CUNY, which is the City University of New York. It's the second largest urban institution or academic institution in the country, first being in California. And so what we had there, and often actually I would say it replicates here at NYU, are the people that are doing the work that are also teaching in the classroom. And so I'm not separating those two realities. Part of my experience is about that bringing your whole self to work kind of we sort of like are allowed to do that now. And I would bring the streets into the classroom and the classroom to the streets all the time. And so the mentorship takes place not really in a linear way, but we're trying to move movements through scholarship, and we're bringing scholarship to people so that we can learn and move things forward. And so as a librarian, that's really important to me. As an archivist, where we're thinking of counter storytelling, of reimagining whose authority it is to make conversations happen and to move these conversations forward. I think one of my favorite memories is that I went to CUNY for 2 master's degrees, and one of them was a library science degree where I had an amazing professor who, when I was in his class, I sort of challenged him and he challenged me back. And I think that that's an opportunity that you can take on in the classroom, is to be present and bring your whole self to that conversation. Sure, there's a syllabus, there's a list of here's what you're supposed to do, but there's also you as a person and how you react to that information. Because the faculty, just like the students, want to be activated. Activate your professors. Change their day, just like you're expecting them to change yours, and they will respond to that. And so that was how I treated that program. And through that, I got a lot of mentoring, whereas my MFA, I was kind of like passive. I just was there to like get it done, and it wasn't as engaging for me. And so I didn't get that activation, and nor did the faculty from me. And so I don't think I pulled anything out of that program. So I think the question of how it happens in the moment. In every single moment that you have with another person, you can change the world just through activating each other. So that's where I'll leave it, and hopefully that answers the question.
It did. One thing y'all will learn about me is that I should not be moderating this panel because I'm all into the conversation. I forget that I'm supposed to be moderating, but no, that was amazing. And I think one of the things that you all sort of touched on is that like mentorship doesn't look like, you know, passing a note, will you be my mentor? Yes or no, like check yes or no. Or it doesn't have to be, you know, I have to sign up for this program and they assign me a mentor. You know, as Charlton was saying, you know, your people, right? Those are the people that you find. And it might be faculty, but it also might be your peers. It might also be your ancestors. So yeah, I love that. Wonderful. And going on that note, you know, Charlton talked about this a little bit, but how do you find your people? Like, how do you find those mentors, especially as new incoming or continuing graduate students that are here in the audience? What are some things, either practical or, you know, advice that you could give them about how to find those people?
One thing I think, based on what we have, this is working, yeah. Yes. Is that we should never treat a mentor as equivalent to a significant other. You know, some people treat a mentor like this is their boyfriend or their girlfriend, that's usually, I find, a recipe for disaster. Like, have you ever heard the story like, I texted Mary and Mary didn't text me back, what's happening, and like, this is, I can see where this is going. This is going to be, become a kind of a confrontation. So in building a relationship, and especially as how I started this conversation today, speaking about family and having children, when building any relationship, and especially a mentor-mentee relationship, sending an email and the person not responding to you the next day is not the end. Even responding next week is not the end. What we just heard in terms of the fact that there are different types of mentors, and usually there's never ever one person that embodies all of those things. I found academic mentors very easily, but the individuals who are going to help me to navigate being international and from the global south, or whatever synonym you want to use for that, and all the identities that I was then bringing into a Columbia University space, very privileged, very Upper East Side, especially in my department. Everybody spoke 3 languages. I spoke barely English. Having somebody to kind of help you navigate that was then a different mentor. The academic mentors that had already established were often sometimes not prepared, because sometimes they were also from these privileged spaces. They were from Yale and from Harvard. They were white. They were upper middle class. They were only Americans. So finding those individuals to help me with the other aspects of mentoring was very, very important. And I think that's something which is very important for us to kind of understand, and to get away from, as we said, in this kind of feeling that this is a kind of a transactional relationship where there is some kind of obligation of some kind, so to speak. And the less we can kind of think in those terms and think of this as something which is more organic, more fluid, that this could be anybody, and that those anybody's could bring different things to what we need to get ahead. And also that there are things that we can be thinking about in terms of how we can contribute to this relationship. Saying thank you, writing to somebody and said, I did this one class that you did, and here's how I've used it in my life, in a internship that I did later on. Going to the book launch of a professor who I liked their work, and having them see and understand that I am here because I value you and I support you, and how this brings rapport and builds on this relationship that I've started in the classroom, and how this can lead to greater things. And also really expecting nothing from somebody who I have done well in their class, or who I've attended their book launch, or if I've said thank you for, I would say it's kind of the right thing to do. And if this has future perks or benefits, then that's wonderful.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say, I think that it not being transactional, that's a really important piece. I had someone tell me a long time ago, I reached out to someone who I respected and I admired, and I wanted to pick his brain about something. And I started the email. It's like, I know you're so busy, but da da da. Mm-hmm. And he said, don't ever start an email like that. He's like, if I'm busy, I'll tell you, I'll let you know. He's like, but don't apologize for reaching that out. And if I can make it happen, I will. If I can't, I'll let you know. So yeah, no, that's great. Michelle, you were going to add?
Yeah, I was going to say any place, anywhere you go. Part of it is you have to put yourself out there. So first of all, kudos to all of you for coming, and for all of you who are on Zoom land for showing up. That's step number 1. You've got to be in it to win it. Okay, you can use the New York Lotto, the New York Lotto motto, you're there to make connections. So maybe you're going to, a professor's event, but you shouldn't be solely focused on that one individual, because there could be anyone there who you're going to make a connection with, and who may be a peer mentor, right? Because it may be someone who's also in the program with you, but maybe This could be the mentor of the person you actually came to see. It could be anyone. So I would say any opportunity to connect with other individuals is an opportunity for you to meet the next mentor who can help you with XYZ. And really specific XYZ, right? They're not everything, right? Even your boyfriend or girlfriend or your partner should not be everything to you. But there's something that they can offer you that gets you to the next step. And then there's other people. You should have more than one mentor at any time and also throughout your career, because you are going to have different needs. And then there's always paying it forward, that doing, helping, someone's helped you, there is something at some point in time that you'll be able to help them out with. So just every opportunity is an opportunity. So that's what I believe. And yay, CUNY, 2 degrees. Actually 3.
Okay, so I think, like I said, there are peer mentors, there's professors who could be mentors, there could be others outside of the university. Mentors just come in all shapes and all forms and for different reasons. So I've had mentors who've taught me how to be a woman in science, because you have to position yourself a certain way. Or I've had mentors who teach me how to be a mom while I'm in academia, because the demands are very, very, I guess, crazy and you're dealing with many different things. I've had mentors who teach me, now I'm in a leadership role, they teach me management styles. They're all different people. It's not usually one person. So I just find it, I think the qualities in a mentor should be just trust, a safe space to make mistakes, to also be vulnerable in front of that person, because no one's perfect. You're not born with all these skills. There are things you have which should be your strengths, other things you're learning and testing out. You're pushing your own boundaries a bit as you're advancing in your careers. So I found the best mentors in my life, and there are multiple of them depending on what aspect we're talking about, but those who I can have very honest conversations with, be transparent, and just develop a relationship of trust. And so from that point of view, I kind of disagree. It's some of those qualities that you have in a person where you can just let your hair down and be with. Otherwise, if there's a power differential, if there is, top-down tone, if it seems so transactional where one person is getting more than the other, like they'll stop being your mentors when they're not getting something out of you. Those are not characteristics of good mentorship. So maybe I'll just stop at that.
Ooh, can I also do that? I want to talk about dating, because I think it's a good analogy, and I want to go with it, right? So let's say there was an app, right? And you could like swipe left and swipe right on a mentor. The way that I think you could think of this is to have an agenda. And what I tell my students, I teach library science courses, not here because we don't have that program, but at another school. It's a grad program, and I sit with each student. I say to them, we're going to have, it's kind of an office hour, but I call it an information interview. And I say, as a graduate student, this is probably the only time in your life where you essentially have that app. It deletes once you graduate. So it means that you have a special permission to contact people and ask them for an information interview. So you're essentially having an agenda. Maybe you've seen people at conferences, people's writing that you've read that you really admire, other professors that you don't know if you want to take their class or not, or a past professor, whomever it might be. You can email them and say, hey, I'm a grad student at this program, and I would love to take you for coffee for 30 minutes, have a quick Zoom, ask you questions about your research, whatever it might be. And because you're a grad student, it's not inappropriate, right? Like once you graduate, it'll be weird. It's like, what do you want? Why are you emailing me? I don't understand this conversation. But being a grad student is sort of the allowance for that. And what you do is you ask questions about what is it that they do? How do they do it? How do they know? Or how did they get to that idea that made them groundbreaking? Or here's what I'm working on. And you're gonna do that to people, with people, and you may never see them again, right? Or you may do it and you may say, you know, I would love to chat again, maybe next month, or you'll tell them about what your process is and they'll give you a contact, right? So it's actually the ability to meet people in ways that you won't be able to after grad school, and also kind of like speed dating, if you will, for mentorship, which could turn into mentorship.
Clarify one point because I think something was lost in the communication. My analogy specifically referred to mentees who feel that having a mentor means that this is somebody that you can talk to any time of day or night. And if that access is not there, then the person is not a mentor. You know, so the analogy was, you know, where somebody says, you know, I'm calling Jimmy and he's not answering his phone. Like, what's up? Is he seeing somebody else? Like, you know, this is it. I'm done with Jimmy. You know, so I see this in terms of how people have approached mentors as well. You know, I have young kids. You know, I can't answer every email on the drop of a dime or, you know, be there. You know, sometimes you have to say, today is not the day. You know, I'm here for you, that I'm supporting you, but not this minute. And it's important that students are mature enough to understand that. You know, that their mentors have real lives, often sometimes very high pressure lives in academia, and that, you know, they're mentors that I've not spoken to for a year, but they're still my mentors, they're still there for me, and they're still a part of my journey.
I feel like this is based on personal experience. You've had some assertive mentees, but I think that that's a good point and something to be, you know, self-aware about, right? Like, you know, you can always put the request out there, but again, it might not be today, it might not be tomorrow, it might not be this week, but, you know, people will let you know what they can do and what they can give. And I really like the dating app for mentoring. I like that. I feel like we need to go ahead and any programmers or technical folks in the audience maybe put that together. I love that. So I want to talk a little bit about this because, you know, Charlton talked about bringing your entourage, right? And sometimes your entourage looks like you. You know, they're your people that you're bringing with you, right? But sometimes when you get to a space, especially a PWI, you know, really wanting to connect with folks who do look like you, but that might not be the reality in your department, right? You know, sometimes you might be the only woman, the only person of color, the only fill in the blank, right? And so maybe some practical advice, anyone who would like to speak to this, just mentoring or finding mentors across different gender, racial, and generational identities, right? Maybe even people who could be younger or older than you. Can you have an optimal experience or relationship if your mentor isn't like you, do you think? I think I know the answer to this, but would anyone like to speak to that?
I'll say that for me, and this partly has to do with my area of specialty, most of my mentors were white men, which is a underrepresented group in nursing. You know, doing the work with HIV, you know, these were individuals that, you know, we bonded over the loss of patients, you know, the things that we saw during that time. And I think what's important is that you connect with someone who, again, with the philosophy of more than one mentor, that if that individual is working in your area and that individual has experience in that, do not be fearful of reaching out to develop a mentoring relationship just because the person doesn't share fill in the blank with you. That said, you know, it's wonderful opportunities. And, you know, I mentioned my boss, and I do this, you know, he passed away a year and a half ago. And at the end of his life, because I stayed in touch with him, it was a huge realization of what he did for me just by saying, Michelle, you should do this. That's all he said. And yeah, he was my boss, so I was like, okay, sure. You know, you're gonna give me the time to do this, right? And he's like, yeah. But it set me off on a path that got me here today, that allowed me to do the things for my family. Not that it wouldn't have happened, but maybe in a different way. And there was a lot of gratitude with that. And if I could tell you, you know, gay, bald, white man, you know, just, you wouldn't think, but, oh, we bonded. You know, he was Uncle Peter in our house and to my kids. And so don't be afraid of that. That's my point to you, you know.
I want to jump in on that too. It's something I think about a lot because the queer community believes in itself as birthed here in New York City in 1969 at Stonewall, right? The queer community created a narrative around initially white gay men who were the fathers of that, and you know, conception. And then later there's been, oh right, but Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson was there. So there were trans women of color there too. And so there was sort of this continuous conversation of authority as it relates to queer history. And so with that in mind, it's natural that a lot of my mentors at the start were white folks, elders, men and women who really gave me the tools that I needed to uncover the untold queer histories, right? So now we know more through archives and through storytelling and through grant-making projects. And so the reason why I mention that is because when you have white mentors, and you will have white mentors because white mentors have the power, likely, in the fields that you're entering, and they're the ones who can teach you the most about freedom, right? And about access. And so you don't want to deny yourself connection to that, and really it tastes good, actually, when you get your lips on some power. And so you want to, you know, suckle it, and then you want to distribute it and disseminate it, but also there's goodwill and there's good intention for them to look to you, right? And say, hey, you, not me type of person, I want to share my power with you. But with that comes a likelihood of some infantilizing, or you will see some sediment of racism, not because they can help themselves, but because we're all in this world and racism is ordinary, and so that's what is going to happen, and you're going to feel it. And they're not going to know it's there, and it's not any fault of either of you that it exists, right? Like, we're in this system. And so you're going to go to other people of color to also seek out as mentors. And what's going to be interesting about that relationship is you're not going to talk about race at all. You're going to talk about the stuff you came to talk about, right? Because actually now we don't need to think about that. So the dykes of color that I get to talk to, we're not sitting around talking about being Black. We're talking about the archive. We're talking about metadata. We're talking about, you know, digitization strategies, whatever it is, because we don't have that layer that's separating us. So I think what you want to do is you want to have a multiplicity, right? You want to diversify your mentorship group. Don't disregard what you can benefit from, and also how you can transform them too, right? In terms of relationship with people that don't look like you, it's so important. I think the queer community has taught us this. And I always say, since I was, you know, of my siblings, I have more access to white people and white people's money, i.e. working at foundations or I was a program officer for a few years because I was queer. So I had this like through line of connectivity that others may not have. So you really want to take advantage of your access. If you're the only person of color in a room, then everyone in that room should know who you are, and you should know them, and it should feel like real relationship building. And then, if that feels draining because of that sediment that's going to be there that no one can help, then you find folks of color too.
Thank you, Shawn. I feel like from your remarks and just, what we've been talking about today is really this through line or this thread or this common refrain that keeps coming up, is that you should have a bunch of mentors. You should have a bunch of people in your life. Dr. Karen Jackson Weaver, who couldn't be with us today, often says you need to have a board of directors. And have that board of directors. Maybe there's someone who you go to for academic questions. Maybe there's someone that you do talk to about race and what it's like to be the only in a room. And maybe that's, maybe they're people from different industries. Reverse mentoring. I'm sure all of you probably learn a lot from your students as well. I know the graduate students that work in my office, they keep me young. And I learned so much from just listening to them and being with them. And that sort of reverse mentoring, like you should have a whole board of directors of different types of folks that teach you different types of things and pour different types of things into your life and into your career. Awesome.
Actually, can I
Yeah,
add something?
please.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about not so much about race and all those things, but being an international person. Very difficult to integrate, right? The default is always that you're supposed to hit the ground running and just figure out what's going on. The way of, so I came from India, where it's very top down in the educational system. You don't just put your feet up in front of a professor, eat in class. It's impossible. You just can't do that. So you think so much before actually asking questions, before approaching people. Plus, I don't know, maybe the Indians who live here and they're sort of like artificial selection in the sense that they're all doing certain things, but the real life in India is not like that. You have you have a lot of subcultures, you have still the gender issues, all this kind of stuff, right? So it's very hard to come in and just male or female or other, just to come and hit the ground running. I really wanted to bring this up as an international person. So when you say a mentor that looks like you, maybe they didn't look like me as in being India, but immigrants, someone who had navigated their way, someone who had just figured out what works, what doesn't work. I think someone like that, whether they look like you or not, is really important. I feel like we don't do that enough at all. The way grades are structured is different. The way classroom is structured is different. The way tests are, it's different. So I just wanted to throw that out there. And most of my mentors have actually been white, because when I was in Wisconsin, that's who there was initially. But they've opened doors for me everywhere. Even at NYU, they've opened doors for me. I can't say for 1 second that they haven't. And frankly, because of my personal experience that I described to you when I opened my remarks, I didn't want an Indian woman to be my mentor, because I felt like the next thing they'd be telling me to do is, have you finished cooking dinner for your kids? Did you really say you're traveling? I know the life, people are different, but that was my experience. So I appreciated not having mentors who exactly look like me, because I was able to now see a whole different perspective, and they opened doors for me at every stage.
Thank you for that. We've touched on a lot of the questions that I had prepared, and so I just want to give a warning to our virtual and in-person audience. If you have questions that you want to ask, start thinking about them and formulating them now, because I think I have about 2 more questions that I prepared that we haven't really touched on yet. So get ready, start writing down your questions all. And maybe we have talked about this a little bit, but the maintenance of those relationships. I remember putting a lot of pressure on myself in graduate school, saying like, I have to set a calendar and a reminder, and I have to reach out every, so many days to keep them warm and make sure they remember me. And that was just setting myself up for failure, because that's just not, feasible and maintainable. Once you have found someone that you connect with on the app, or someone you've swiped right on, or a mentor that you want to continue to foster that connection, what are some tips for doing that? Like, how do you stay in touch without it being too much? Like, what should we expect as mentees of our mentors? Like, how much time should we ask of them? Any tips about maintaining those relationships?
I can go. I'll just say two sentences. I usually keep in touch when there's a big benchmark of some sort that I want to share with them, because I think it makes them feel proud and happy that they've invested that time in me. And I sometimes do. Coffees are the best investment. Coffee chats, real, in person. And I guess just see if you can meet them for 30 minutes. But also just keep in touch. It's nice. It's building a relationship over time. So I do that a lot. And walk and talk is another thing I do if they're out of state. We'll just go for a walk and be on the phone.
I had one mentor who would seek me out every Saturday at my reference desk shift, and I didn't recognize that she was trying to mentor me for a year. And I was like, oh, okay. She ended up giving me a job at some point. But I think that she taught me something there, which is to be consistent. Show up when you know the person's there. Like, if you want to, don't stalk, but also just if you know they're going to be at a conference or there's a gathering that's happening and they're in the room, be sure to continue to put yourself in front of them and be gracious that they're there, and give them an update, say hello, but always have them thinking of you. Letting them know what you need, I'm on the job market right now, or I'm looking to publish a paper, not sure what journal to publish it in, or I'm looking for a co-author, something like that. I'm putting a poster out, or did you see that call? Do you have any tips? So I think it's about posturing yourself as a mentee with them. So when you say hello, you're not saying hello as a peer or oh, how's the weather? You're actually coming to them with a mentee type embodiment, and then they understand how you want them to show up for them when you talk to them, so that they're already thinking about you when they see something come up. Suddenly the roles will reverse.
Thank you. So my last question is actually just about any final words of wisdom that you might have for our newly admitted graduate students, or some of our current graduate students. Anything that you think about mentoring or networking that you'd like to leave our audience with?
So one of the things that I found most interesting as somebody who does not identify as American, all my identities are, I would say, non-traditional, was that a lot of my mentees were from here in Manhattan on the Upper East Side. So they were wealthy. I would say a lot of them, actually interesting, were Jewish, but people who had seen the world and were people of means. What they brought to the table was a sense of what it meant to make a connection. This was something which they had been schooled in since they were in diapers. It was obvious. They made it so organic, in terms of how they approached the situation in the ways that we spoke about. When there were events that I was speaking at, for example, today, quite likely they would be there. They would send congratulations. I noticed that, this was in the Columbia News, congratulations about this. And as you said, then they would keep me informed about things that were happening in their lives. Like, I've just been accepted into Harvard Law School, and I'm doing environmental law. Thank you so much for, speaking to me about these key things, which are now becoming such an important focus of how I see myself and how I understand the world. I was also in the same breath saddened, appalled that there were not the minority students who were taking that position in my life, who I felt like were not seeing me as a resource or as somebody that was on their side. And but I also understood the cultural, the social implications of why that was the case. That many of them were, like, I'm just like toughing it out and making it. And, these issues in terms of how social relationships are built were just different in their world. And I've actually spent a lot of time as a professor thinking about how to circumvent that, how to make that reach, how to actually help my students think about, okay, like, we're in the first class, this is a core course that you have to take to graduate from this department, but I would like you also to think about how this relationship might look like 5 years from now. And how I understand that people, because you are Chinese, my husband is Chinese, so we speak about these issues. Because you are somebody who is from the developing South or whatever, because you might be of a different gender, how this might look differently for you, but I am inviting you to think about this relationship and understand what it could be. So I try to have that as a discussion very, very early, and hopefully it gives me enough time over the course of semester to kind of massage that and nurture that and bring people to a place of trust as well, where they feel that they can look you in the eye and understand, like, I believe you. I believe that what you say, that you really believe this, and you'll come through. I also value, as I said, that this space, and I'm hoping that we all can, continue to think about all of that.
Thank you, Leo.
I would add that, kind of transitioning, always see yourself, I know right now you're thinking of yourself as a potential mentee, but you are also a mentor. So there are people who you are inspiring right now. And you should continue to put yourself out there. So when you do go to those events, you want to see yourself, you're working two roles. And in a lot of the work that I do with students, particularly those students who are not, that are told that they just need to follow what's in the syllabus and check all those boxes, and if it's not there, you don't have to do it, or it's not something that comes naturally to them because they weren't raised to think of doing those things. We have to put ourselves out there. So I will remind my students, no matter who they are, of what I can do for them outside of the classroom. So yes, I have this role for you for this class, but I am invested in you continuing, completing this degree, going on. And for many of my students, particularly those who are underrepresented in nursing and healthcare, I want you to be a faculty person. I want you to, when someone comes into a classroom and sees you, or maybe your name, whatever it is that kind of stands out, that yes, I am a person of color, from a diverse background, that student's going to say, aha, you're here, I'm in the right place. And I always tell them, you are exactly where you need to be, and you need to stay here. I make sure that they understand that. Because they're going to need to, when things get rough, they're going to need to have my voice, you know, if they can manage. I usually say, oh, I hate hearing my voice. You must hate hearing me too. But that little voice is in the back there saying, no, you can do this. No, you're supposed to be here. This is a speed bump. This is not a barrier. This is a speed bump. So what do you do with the speed bump? You slow down, you go over, and then you keep on going. So that's are those things. So, and then what do? I make sure I show up at events like this and other events, so that way I can help, you know, make connections, even if it's just a short conversation and we never see each other again. If I've said something to you that makes you feel like, yeah, I'm in the right place, then I've done a good job. I've done a good deed for today. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you for that. And now all of us have the privilege of having your voice in our head to saying that to us. So thank you for that.
I have two quick things to say. I think what I've connected with mentors over is that, you know, being energized on maybe a common topic or just getting excited about some science, because I'm from the sciences. And then it really didn't matter who that person was. I think we just connected on the quality of work. So just put your sincere, genuine self in front of them and follow your passion. And I think you'll connect at a very different level. So that's really one piece of advice. And as she said, there's reverse mentoring. You know, there's a lot that as a mentor, I'm getting out of that person for skills that they've developed in subsequent years after my training. But I also, the one thing that didn't come out was I used to be the executive director of doctoral programs, and I did that for about 7 years. So when I was a mentor of students, and I worked so closely with them, especially as they were getting through their dissertation phase, what I really appreciated as a mentor was when my mentee managed up. So managed me up, right? So kind of was a partner with me in strategizing and planning, and told me, I need this from you on such and such day. It doesn't feel so burdensome at all then when they are managing you up. I need this. This is what I need you to do. This is your deadline. I would almost like it when they boss over me and say, this, I need this on this time. So I think managing up really makes it feel less, I don't want to use the word burdensome because it's never a burden, but it makes it a lot easier for them to manage multiple projects and multiple, you know. So like, I think I'm kind of responding to one of the questions that felt transactional. I was wasting their time, but it gets a lot easier when you manage up. So the two things are be your genuine, sincere self and manage up where you can without being entitled. I have to add that.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, I know we want to hear from you, so I'll be quick too. I had made a point earlier that was about have an agenda, and then I let it slip. So I wanted to get back to that to say that your professional scholarly career begins at grad school. It doesn't begin when you graduate. And so I think it's important. I mean, I don't know how old we are, but we're all, you know, in our 40s or older up here. And if only we could have that sweet time back, right? Like there's so many things that we didn't do because we were sort of exploring and exploratory, and that's an important place to be. But you can start in grad school. And some ways to think that through are to attend conferences and seek out, like almost envision, one day I'm gonna be on that panel, I'm gonna present it this way. And I have an example of that. There is a conference called the LGBTQIA ALMS, which is the Archives, Libraries, Museums, Special Libraries Conference. It's international. And when I was in grad school, I went to one that was in New York City, and it was at the Graduate Center, and I was like, oh yes, like, no, actually I presented there. I presented in one of the panels. And it was a mentor who brought me in and told me to present. And I didn't know she was a mentor at the time. I thought, another Black queer librarian asked me to sit alongside her. That was a mentorship move, right? And so I presented on that panel, and it was done through a organization called the first LGBT research center in the country, which is actually in New York City, called CLAGS, and they would have public events, and I would go to those as a grad student, just to, like, you know, learn what is my agenda, right? What am I trying to do here? Where am I going with this scholarship? And once I figured that out, I was always in the room. I was sort of coordinating, networking with folks. And I ended up participating in CLAGS and working there, ended up working with the ALMS conference. 10 years later, I keynoted their London conference, right? And then I ended up also sitting on the board and chairing the board for CLAGS. And so all of that was sort of like, it couldn't happen unless I had started 10 years prior, right? Which is now. So if you have an agenda and you know where you're trying to take it, then you know who you're meeting and why you're meeting them, and you know what conversations you're having, and it happens organically. So it's really about setting yourself up in this moment to be bored with it 20 years later because you've done it already. And so you're almost starting a new agenda. So really just take advantage of the time that you have now. I feel like an old person. When I was younger, if only I had known then. So hear that and really step into it. And there's never a bad place to begin. You have to start somewhere. And so starting anywhere is great if you start now.
Thank you. Thank you to all of our amazing panelists. Let's give a round of applause for this amazing faculty panel. For those of you who are just beginning your journey at NYU, you have a taste of what's to come. So thank you. I really, really appreciate you all being here and taking the time. And now we will open it up to your questions. We're going to move a mic, I believe, here in the front. So the folks who are in person we're going to run the mics. Okay, perfect. And I know there was a question earlier that I cut off. So if we can make sure yes, thank you.
There, is this working? Okay, so I did have a question earlier for the previous speaker, but I'll hold that for now. My question for all of you is, do you believe there's a broader call to action for this collective as it relates to mentorship and transforming this institution in the fields in which we're working? Certainly there are a lot of really amazing takeaways that we can depart with at an individual level about how to approach mentorship as single people in this world, but I'm cognizant of the fact that we have an amazing opportunity here as a collective to think about what we can do, what muscles in the room, how do we become activated, mobilized, and organized into what might be a longer term vision for change, right? Which I think is at the heart of mentorship. Thank you.
And can you tell us your name and your school?
Yes, I'm Sinead Lopez. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm an MPA student at Wagner.
I'm a Wagner.
Oh. Hey.
So I think if I understand your question, or your maybe throwing the gauntlet down, right? The challenge is how do we expand this? What is it that can be done to expand, this sharing of ideas, this promotion of how to approach mentoring, and either from the perspective of being the mentor or being the mentee. I'm going to put it back to you. And for you all, because obviously there are people who could not be here today, or who were unable to join us on Zoom. So how do they get these little nuggets that we've shared with all of you? And I'm going to say that you all can take it and disseminate it, because there is peer mentoring. So that's something that you can do, that you can share. So, when you're here in September and there's somebody sitting next to you and they're not sure what to do, and maybe they're brave enough to say, oh, I don't know what to do. I really think share what you've learned and do that peer mentoring to help them to take that first step. And then maybe it's someone that and you do the introduction to help them get started. So I would say the challenge is to all of us to kind of live that all the time, wherever we are. And I will leave it to April, because she's the programmer of all this. I don't know.
I can answer it too. I think I love the question. Thank you for it. And When I think of the sort of the grander project of mentoring, why are we doing this and what is its value? I think of citation because I'm a librarian. And what that really equates to is the expansion of the canon and to bringing ideas and thought leaders with you to your own research. And so often if we sort of investigate the canon and pick your field, you find that there is a network of people that are talking to each other, with each other, and amongst each other and pushing forward their ideas. And that's how it began, that scholarship. And so when you're submitting your papers, you're thinking, who are the people I want to cite in this paper? Who can I prove that this groundbreaking idea was begun in spot A, and now I'm bringing it to spot Z, and this is a literature review. This is who's said it before me. And so now I'm adding to the conversation. Part of what mentoring and networking does is it allows you to not just have your thought leaders on paper, but actually in person, especially if you're alive at the same time. The Academy has expanded so largely that you're a living, breathing unit right now, and you're all likely sharing similar ideas. And so I often tell students, if you're not sure how to begin your research, start in the dissertation database and see who's just published on this or who's just deposited their dissertation last year. If not, every spring there's another few thousand dissertations that get put into that database. So these are folks you should be talking to and who you should know them because you're probably uncovering the same groundbreaking research. And so with that is the network, but it's also the people who sat on their committees, the people who will be on yours, those are your mentors. So it's really about bringing the canon alive with you into the future of whatever your field is, so that you're a part of a grander conversation outside of yourself.
Hi, my name is Precious, and I'm going into the Public Relations and Corporate Communications Master's program here. So I guess I'm 25, and I don't know exactly what I want to do, but I have some ideas. So when you guys first started in your programs, did you guys have an exact plan, or did mentoring, thank you, or did mentoring and meeting other people help you develop that path?
I think the beauty of graduate school is also that you sit through courses, you have experiences, practical experiences, work, that shapes it. So it's probably a good idea for you not to have an exact plan now and to discover what's out there and then figure it out. Something will really catch your fancy.
I hope I didn't make it seem like you have to start now, have your whole agenda. It's more like you can have a really specific idea of what you want to do now, and then it's going to change next week or next semester, depending on who's giving the classes. So it's really just about where you stand. Even having a huge question is an agenda, right? Like, I don't know, and I want to find out. That's an agenda. So just really making yourself open to receiving whatever comes with those questions that you have.
And I would say I fought hard on the doctorate. I was like, nope, 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 nope. So you may start one place and you'll wind up someplace else, but this is the time you want to stay open to what those opportunities are, because you don't know. And what you're thinking right now, when you're done, you're going to think back and like, oh, wow, I thought I was going to do this, but look at where I am. This is great. So just really stay open to where this may lead you, this journey.
I think that's all great advice. I have nothing to add. I know that some of our panelists do have to head out soon. So if you have any questions specifically for Dr. Parekh that you'd like to ask, now would be a great time. Yeah.
Well, not only for him, but for everyone. I'm Lidia Diaz. I'm from the Dominican Republic, and I'm doing the Master's in Poetry in Spanish.
Woo woo.
Yeah. So my question goes along the same analogy of the dating app, right? Once you have like identified a potential mentor and you say like, oh God, I would really like to nurture from their expertise and their mentorship, what would be your strategies to like seduce them or like proving to them that you're worthy of their investment and your talent your talent and like get them excited about you? What would be your approach?
What is your photo that's gonna get them to swipe right as well?
You got to put yourself out there. You have to make yourself known, and they're going to say, oh, wait, who is she? What? You know, so you have to get out there. Just again, if we're going to stay with this analogy of dating, you have to put yourself out there. So wherever there's an opportunity that they're there. Now, you know, you don't want to kind of overdo it, right? But you want to make sure that other people maybe have an opportunity to introduce you, or you have an opportunity to show your work. So you're doing poetry, so maybe you're at a reading and you have an opportunity to read some of your work. So those types of things.
So graduate students reach out to me all the time. I'll get emails sometimes from individuals who are on the other side of the world, who would like to meet with you for some reason. Maybe they're trying to get into NYU, various reasons. Usually, of course, as with any social interaction, you're doing a certain level of screening in terms of, am I going to respond to this? What happens next? Usually, I find, in terms of going back to the analogy of getting that date, so to speak, is the students who are most likely to respond, who students I've had some kind of, even the most casual interaction with on some level. So, for example, I run a book club. It's on Zoom. Anybody can come to this book club. Students who I find are usually serious about meeting me, they'll come to the book club. They'll have something to say about the discussion that is being read. And therefore, when you do get that random email, so to speak, you do remember, they're able to recall that, I came to your book club meeting, ABCD. That is a hook for me, so to speak. So, sometimes you have to kind of think about what that hook might be, because, that kind of cold email coming in quite likely is going to get ignored. And, I think we've heard it so many times here as well. Sometimes you have to not put all your eggs in one basket, because again, going back to the experience I just shared, you might be somebody that I really would like to speak with. What you're mentioning in your email is something that I feel passionate about, but it's the week that my child is going through illness, or that I have a big proposal deadline that's going to get done. It's not going to get that response that week. On your side, I hope that you're going to be persistent, that in another month or two, you'll follow up and say, Professor Douglas, I attended your book club back in February. I would still very much appreciate, at the end of the semester, would you be willing to speak with me on Zoom? Or, could you give me a sense of what your time looks like in terms of an opportunity to speak with you? That persistence, again, I would say also gets my attention. I'm like, this person is serious. They have something that they want to share. I think I'm going to prioritize this interaction, so to speak. So again, it's kind of thinking about that hook, being a level of persistence, again, without the kind of privilege or pretentiousness, kind of being clear in terms of what that connection that you perceive to be, or what that ask is that you perceive that I am going to be interested in, all are key to kind of, getting that first date.
Thank you. Almost like dating, have similar interests, express. Yeah, okay. We're going to stop with the the dating analogy. I think we have time for a few more questions. I see 2 hands in the back, and I know that we probably have some Zoom questions as well. Okay, perfect.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Alicia. I'm from Jamaica, and I'm a prospective master's student for environmental health sciences. And I guess my question is really around research mentorship. So I'll be doing research in the lab, and we have a couple lab rotations to get done. How do you find your mentor when it comes on to research, since you guys have probably done quite a lot of research during your time? Thank you.
I'm from the sciences where there are lots of labs, so maybe let me start. Labs when they work can be great, but boy, can they be toxic. It's mentee stuck in a room with people who you have to kind of turn up and see sometimes every day, and kind of thinking through that relationship and putting your best foot forward from the day one can really count. Kind of how that introduction happens, those first few days or week, those kinds of relationships, how they get established can translate into months or years of future relationships in terms of how that dynamic happens. Sometimes, again, we've heard this from our panel that the ultimate person who is going to help you survive, on one hand, navigate, get advance in terms of publications or whatever the agenda is, so to speak, might not be in that space. Sometimes that actually could be a good thing, where you have some kind of independent third party who you can go to when these kind of lab conflicts come up, because they will at some level. You can turn to help you kind of think outside the box and have this kind of out of body experience. Because as with any conflict, be it a conflict with your mom or in the workplace or wherever it is, sometimes having that space, that sounding board, who can say, well, let's step back and just kind of look at all the cards and kind of rethink this, so to speak, can be invaluable. You might get to the same conclusion, but often even the stress management that you get out of having that type of mentorship can be very, very important.
I think that was a good point. It was something that I was also going to say for the previous question too, which is that the whole panel started out with mentorships you can have negative mentors as well as positive mentors. And so you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you, if you will. So you don't want any and everybody to just be your mentor. So you want to think through why it is that you are suddenly wanting them to be that person for you, and just be honest and authentic from that place. And you'll understand what you may put into the ask. It could be a formal ask. I would love for you to mentor me and I would love to be your mentee. Or it could just be that you continue the relationship for however it is and whatever it is. And it's true that the mentor, I think we sort of went without saying, is often someone who is outside of the formal relationship that you're having. So if it's your boss, that person is your boss and you're their employee. If it's your professor, that person is your professor and you're their student. It's often after you've left the class or once you've left the job that suddenly you realize, I want to maintain that relationship, and then you become sort of this mentor-mentee space. So you want to think through, what are the dynamics that we currently have, if they exist? Let's just keep that going as it is, right? And then after, when that dynamic is no longer there and you have the choice to continue a relationship with them or not, that's when you may choose to engage with a mentorship type relationship. So there's often those moments of shift that that's when you have the power to move that forward.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you both. We have 2 more questions? Okay.
I have a question on Zoom.
Okay.
Would we like to continue with questioning?
Yeah. Yes, I think we have just a few more minutes, because I know we have our networking reception. I believe some of our, I'm sorry? Yeah. Yeah.
And try to ask multiple questions, and then we get all
Maybe
of them, and then we can like.
yeah.
Okay, I love
Power
it. That's
round.
great. Okay, that's a great question. All right, so I'll start with one, which is I'm trying to summarize a few of the questions in Zoom, particularly around finding mentors and specific ways in which you've been able to connect with individuals. And so a lot of people are asking, I'm entering in a field where there's not a lot of BIPOC folks represented. I'm in the sciences. Where do I go to find these resources, either at NYU or in New York? So that's one question. Let's start with that one, and then I'll summarize a few of the others.
I'm going to promote again professional associations. So for the health professions, particularly nursing, there are affinity nursing associations. National Association of Hispanic Nurses, the Black Nurses Association, the Asian Pacific Islander Nursing Association, the Native Alaskan American Indian Nurses Association. So those are great places, and oftentimes there are local chapters. The other thing that's great about them is that they have scholarships. Scholarships are great, but also networking and mentoring opportunities. So I would say that's one place, if you're not finding anything specific to where you are and you have that need for that person who looks like you connection or has the same experiences as you connection, that's one thing that I would recommend.
Perfect. And then I think we have one last question in the audience. And I think some of our panelists will be able to stick around for those who are in the room. So you'll still have an opportunity to ask your question. Yes, I see you. Yes, all right. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Nia O'Connor. I am an international student from Kingston, Jamaica. I'm an incoming Human Capital and Analytics and Technology grad student from the School of SPS. And my main question really would be, what do you suggest for finding a mentor in the international student space? Because one of the greatest challenges that I faced after undergrad as well was finding opportunities post-grad. Because we're limited to OPT. My program now is STEM, so I get 3 years to work, and after undergrad I had 1 year. The challenge is companies tend to not want to take you on when you are limited to 1 or 3 years, and then sponsorships and the whole work. So what do you suggest for me to do to find others who have been through this already, who have found different ways to combat this?
Well, first of all, let's say that I'd be very interested in speaking with you about all of those things. I entered the United States with a Fulbright. I ended up also having 3 years post-PhD, navigating that and getting mentors to help me to navigate that, and being able to return to the United States legally to work was all a part of that. In terms of what we just heard, in terms of where to find mentors, a very powerful way as part of the associations is also speaking to other graduate students. Finding spaces where they communicate, be this online. For me, for example, just to say, there was a Fulbright Alumni Association. So those who had graduated, but were still connected to some level, being able to learn from them, like, hey, how did you do this? What happened? What was your experience? Who should I talk to? So graduates and also graduate students, because the nice thing, I must say, even for those who are still looking for programs, is that grad students will be blatantly honest. Like, talk to Professor Amato, like, avoid Professor other person, so to speak. So that can also be invaluable in kind of, because going back to the now infamous dating app analogy, we know that dating apps can be ridiculously unreliable. the bio seems amazing, why are we not best friends? But, in terms of speaking with somebody who has actually interacted with them, what they're like, what is their work ethic, how do they interact with people, get a sense of how people's experience in terms of them dealing with women, minorities, LGBTQ people. Again, graduate students can be very honest and give you a very unfiltered experience in terms of what that is like. I'd also say, I'd be very happy to share with you beyond this, what my moving through graduate school and in terms of what those next steps look like. Some of the steps were fortunately facilitated by Columbia University. They had teams, offices. Sometimes you were lawyers who would come in and speak to graduate students to say, okay, here are your options. If you're a graduate student, this is the lay of the land. This is how we can help you. But again, I also learned about those resources by speaking to grad students and other communities, mentors, and I'd be happy to share those with you as well.
I can't let us mention the other school without saying that NYU also has a fabulous Office of Global Services. And I have had students who've worked in my office, graduate students who've worked in my office, who have built wonderful relationships with the staff in OGS, who have helped them throughout that process, helped them, kept in touch. One of the program staff from OGS shared with me that she went to the baby shower of a former student that she helped, that was an international student who she helped navigate OPT and navigate, sponsorship and all of those things. So I think both faculty, but also administrators, a little plug for administrators here at NYU, those can be fabulous mentorships and fabulous relationships to foster, because these are also folks who care about your success and want to see you, go off to be a superstar and one day be on a panel like this. So thank you so much for your question. Thanks for answering.
I just wanted to emphasize that point, that sometimes administrators can be actually more resourceful because they are plugged in, and sometimes have less selfish reasons in terms of building mentor-mentee relationships. Sometimes you do find that mentors in academic spaces, they weed out their mentees because they're, again, the pressure of publish or perish. They're thinking about what mentees are contributing to that journey for them, so to speak. Not to say that this is not win-win, but again, sometimes dealing with administrators and having administrators as part of your network of mentees can bring important blessings and opportunities which are not available otherwise.
As an NYU administrator, I approve that message. Thank you. Let's give one last round of applause for our fabulous panel. And as we wrap up our time together, I just have a few quick thank yous. On behalf of the Office of Graduate Admissions and Marketing Consulting and the Division of Global Enrollment Management and Student Success, I'd like to express my gratitude to all the Creating Connections panelists and speakers. Carol Kim and Dr. McIlwain, thank you for sharing your personal stories and practical advice. Additionally, I want to thank our panelists, Professor Douglas, Professor Crespo-Fierro, Professor Parekh, and Professor Smith-Cruz for your thoughtful contributions and your engaging discussion. To my team, the GMAC team, and to all of those who worked hard behind the scenes to make this event a success, from our event staff, to our technical support and streaming team, to those who made this beautiful room clean and set out our food today, I want to thank them sincerely. And then finally, to all of you, our attendees, congratulations again on your admission to NYU. I really hope that this event has inspired you to seek out, create, and maintain those connections. We'll be emailing all of you a survey. Please fill it out for us. And then we'll also be sharing a recording of this event. So if there's anything that you missed, anything you want to go back and write down some of this great advice, we'll be sharing that. And to those of you who opted into the directory, where you can connect with other attendees in the room and in the virtual space. We'll also be sending out an email with instructions on how to access that directory so that you can send out those LinkedIn invitations and connect with your fellow Creating Connections cohort. And so for those of you who are in the room, I'm going to ask for you to stay seated for just another minute so I can give you some information about our networking session. But to those of you who have joined the live stream or the recording, thank you so much. And this concludes the program.